Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
You hear that?
Yeah, it's asked me to consent. Oh, have you upgraded your Zoom or something?
I haven't touched my Zoom.
Can't tell, mate.
Wow, how weird is that then? That caught us both by surprise. It's funny what makes you smile on a Monday morning, isn't it? Right then, I'm assuming we're going to edit that out, or should we leave that in?
I think we ought to leave it in.
Right then. Lorraine, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Stu. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So today, we're going slightly off piste, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about something that dropped on my desk Friday. It was this book.
Oh, I say. Not a practical guide to document
It's a practical guide, but the key with this book is not the guide, it's who the author might be.
Oh!
Oh.
What?
Yes. So how come then? What's been going on? Why have you decided to write a book?
Well, I spent a lot of time over the last 3 years writing The Practical Lawyer every month, well, most of it, which I think has made me a better writer, hopefully. I can hopefully express my ideas a bit more succinctly. But last summer, the Land Registry dropped the stuff on Mercury signatures and witnessed electronic signatures, and they sort of slipped them out in a blog. And I thought, oh God, what's all that about? And I sort of thought to myself, well, if I'm saying, oh God, what's all that about? Maybe practitioners will be too. So that sort of planted the seed of an idea to do a book with the lovely Gary and Tim at Law Brief Publishing.
Okay, blimey. Okay, so I'm just going to read out the first line of your book. The irony of me writing a guide which encompasses electronic signatures will not be lost on anyone that knows me. So I think you might have half answered this question already, but why did you decide to write your first book and choose this as the subject matter? Because it was a bit of a bombshell that was dropped, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And actually, that's sort of the point, because as you say, as I said in the intro to anybody that knows me, in fact, have I got my mug? Yeah, I've even got my mug. You probably can't see it, that it just says be bold or italic. And I got that because that's all I can do. From an IT point of view, that is the limit of my skills.
What about turn on and off?
I don't really necessarily have to do that, to be quite honest. But I sort of thought, well, I wanted to write something for people like me around sort of electronic signatures, because this is nothing to do with the tech, it's nothing to do with the software, it's nothing to do with the knob twiddling. All of that side, I'm completely hopeless at, and that's kind of the point, really. And I felt that people in firms that were of a certain age, like myself, this whole tech thing, this whole witnessed electronic signatures thing, I think it poses a really big risk for law firms that haven't thought about it and haven't embraced it, because, lawyers like me often don't know about this stuff and should do, really. So I sort of felt I might hopefully be the perfect person to write this from the perspective of somebody who's A, risk averse, and B, doesn't really do tech. That was sort of the point.
Okay, so if it's not about the tech, you're going to give us a bit of a brief sort of guide as to what's in here, what we can look out for.
Yeah, well, as I say, I've written it for conveyancers. And as I said, Stu, what the Land Reg did last summer, obviously in response to COVID, was drop 2 blogs in May and July. Firstly, the first one said that they would accept Mercury signatures as a means of signing a deed for registration. And then a couple of months later, they slipped out again via their blog, because that seems to be their main way of communicating with practitioners, that they would then accept deeds for registration signed using witnessed electronic signatures. Now, clearly there are, software providers and case management and app providers out there who have the facility to allow people to sign documents electronically, and lots of conveyancers will be used to that. They'll be used to getting their clients signed up, to their terms and conditions, the PIF, maybe even the contract, all electronically, all jolly whiz, don't need to put things in the post, that's all great. But actually, this is talking about deeds being signed using witnessed electronic signatures, and the Land Registry have got some really specific requirements in Practice Guide 8. So apart from talking about contracts and deeds and talking about what the signatures are and what they mean, I talk about a bit of case law, but also I really drill down into Practice Guide 8 and try and help and think for practitioners how to put Practice Guide 8 into, how to implement it.
Okay. So just to be clear, who's the book aimed at?
It's aimed at, well, firstly, people in law firms who are thinking, I need to identify a platform provider. I need to be able to, understand what I need in relation to a platform provider, because that's the Land Registry's term, basically an organisation that provides a framework to offer witnessed electronic signatures. There's actually only about 2 or 3 of them at the moment that actually comply with Practice Guide 8, which is another really important point. Loads of organisations out there that offer, just the facility to sign electronically, but the Land Reg have got some quite specific requirements. So it's people in firms nearer the top who perhaps, for example, don't have an IT department, who need to think about it, but also then the people below them who perhaps run the conveyancing departments, because it's absolutely the case that firms are going to have to do things slightly differently and think about slightly different risks. So the people that have got to implement it, and frankly, the solicitors, licensed conveyancers and paralegals that are being asked to use witnessed electronic signatures, I think, need to understand what they are and the significance of them. So them too. So it's a fairly broad range of people that I think might find it interesting or useful, if not interesting.
Yeah. And out of interest, did you have any involvement with the Land Registry when you wrote the book?
Yeah, I did actually. I came across them in this context at a conference, needless to say, an online conference last year, and got chatting to one of the guys there. And actually, the really nice thing is they sent me, because they are revising Practice Guide 8 quite frequently, so that's another thing practitioners need to keep an eye out for. It's moving fast, really. And in fact, I delayed the publication because they were going to make a change that was quite significant. But yeah, so I gave them some comments and observations and suggested changes when they were looking to update Practice Guide 8, which actually they adopted, they took on board, which is very nice of them. So I've helped them sort of, only in a tiny way, but develop some of the sort of granular things to do in relation to Practice Guide 8. So yeah, there's actually some of my words out there in Practice Guide 8 now, which is nice. And I'm also on their they've got a digital signatures forum, and a much broader sort of electronic digitization forum, and I'm on that too.
Showing off now, aren't you?
Yeah, you get me.
Jesus, I'm not worthy at the moment.
Yeah, stand aside. Stand aside.
Okay, well, I'm gonna cut to the chase then as well. I've not read all of the book, and I know we've briefly discussed this before on Conveyancing Matters. But what's the conclusion? Should firms be using digital signatures?
Well, I think the thing is, I've deliberately tried to take a neutral stance, because I think it's an assessment of risk. Everything for conveyancers is always an assessment of risk. And to be quite frank and sort of quite serious for a minute, I suppose, I take the view that assessment of risk is up to firms to assess. And I think what firms have got to decide for themselves, and what you tend to see, which I find interesting from the outside looking in, because I don't have, I don't work for anybody. I don't have a stance. I don't, I'm not in prop tech or not in prop tech. I'm not in a firm. I'm not trying to sell anything or sell a big app. So I feel like it, I feel I am on the outside looking in, which I think can be quite a useful place to be, really. But the reality is that what you tend to see is absolute evangelists in relation to software, IT, electronic signatures, the cloud. They see that completely as the way forward, and they see everybody else as complete Philistines that don't use it. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you get practitioners who are, you know, completely averse to anything, you know, electronic and in the cloud. You know, they see that as a massive risk. They see the hacking risk as insurmountable. And so what I try to do for conveyancers, because, you know, there is absolutely no doubt that the pandemic has led to you know, quite a at least a speeding up of the adoption of sort of, you know, digital processes more generally for conveyancers. And generally that, I think, you know, frankly, can only be a good thing. But what firms have to assess, particularly in terms of this very, very granular point about the electronic signatures of deeds, and we are specifically talking deeds here, you know, transfers, deeds of easement, that sort of thing, you know, question mark mortgage deeds, I might say. But what firms have got to consider is, well, we are moving from the risk of putting a hard copy of a document in an envelope and sending it to a client to sign and return. And if we've never met the client, how do we know that that is the client? To a different sort of risk, which is sending a document to a client electronically and getting them, following the Practice Guide 8 procedures, I might add, to sign electronically and return it. And it's those assessments of risk that the firms have got to think about. And also, you know, there are different risks for a firm around using witnessed electronic signatures, in particular about how they work internally. And so it's a very long-winded way of saying, Stu, I deliberately haven't tried to reach a conclusion.
Is that just so we read the book?
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. But no, I genuinely think it's a matter of your client base. If you've got a client base, for example, you know, a lot of whom, you know, perhaps frankly, I mean, it sounds a bit ageist, but maybe a slightly older demographic who, you know, if you've got a significant private client, you know, client base, and you do conveyancing work, and lots of people, you know, don't have access to, you know, mobile phones and apps and can't sign stuff electronically, then you might not want to introduce it. If you've got the sort of business where you know, you never meet anybody and everybody's got a mobile phone, then you might be really happy. But there are different sorts of risks to take account of.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think the world's changed so much now, hasn't it? That initially, when this subject came up, it was all about the risk specific to the subject matter. But from a practical point of view, yeah, you've got to start to question now the actual process that we already undertake, and sending a piece of paper to somebody to sign is not a non-risk procedure, is it?
And it's interesting because that's the point I make in the book. Well, you know, interesting, it's a relative concept. I do understand that, but it's the point I make in the book that, and I do a little table. It's not a very difficult table, and I'm, you know, and I always say to anybody when I write or lecture or deliver anything, you know, I've started the thinking. I in no way ever, you know, profess to have done all of it. Hopefully, it just gets people down the road. And there are no doubt other things, but I've done a sort of for and against, you know, of sort of pros and cons of, you know, paper versus electronic. And there's, you know, there's just, and it's very evident there are, when you actually think about it, there are just pros and cons on each side. And one, as I said, one risk just replaces another. But it's interesting when you start to think about it, because, you know, a wet ink signature on a piece of paper has always been seen to be the sort of gold standard. But actually, why is that any less, you know, why is that any less risky when you're just sticking a bit of paper in an envelope and saying to clients, please sign it and send it back?
Definitely.
And you know what people are like. I mean, they, you know, lots of clients, let's be serious, however simple your signing instructions, lots of people don't seem able to sign a document in the presence of a witness and send it back without it being problematic. I mean, I had one quite recently. I might have even mentioned this on a Conveyancing Matters, Stu, where I was locuming and I always check the post coming in, and we'd got a signed transfer. I said, oh, we'll file that on the sale file, got that in readiness for completion. And then, you know how some things just kind of percolate. And about an hour later, I thought, oh, is that signed properly? And I went back to the file, because clearly I didn't know the file because I was locuming, and got it out. And the witness had signed absolutely perfectly, but the signatory hadn't signed it.
Yeah,
You know?
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, we see that all the time, you know, where, you know, please sign, add your name and your address. The address doesn't get added, or, you know, do not date. I can't think how that doesn't mean anything other than do not date.
I know.
Do not alter. I can't think how that means do not alter or anything else, but there you go. What can you say?
But this is, you see, but this is precisely my point, and this is why I wanted to really pick Practice Guide 8 apart, because at the moment, and the Land Reg do concede that this might change over time, but they've set a very sort of prescriptive set of steps that need to be followed for a document to be signed electronically to comply with their standards. Yeah. That's the point. So firms have got to go through these particular hoops, which basically means your platform provider has got to be Land Registry compliant. But there are still, I mean, it sounds an obvious thing to say, Stu, but there are still steps to follow. There are still things that the signatory and the witness must do at the other end remotely while staring at their phones. And that issue about, you know, explaining to a client the things that need to happen and the order that things need to happen in is actually no different in principle. You've still got to get a member of the public to press the right thing at the right time in the right order with the right person standing next to them. And firms need to think about that and think about how they're going to implement that. So I'm not suggesting it's necessarily difficult when you've got it up and running. And I'm sure, bless him, lovely Peter Ambrose, who we've chatted to, would you know, would evangelically tell us, you know, how straightforward it all is. And to be completely fair, I'm absolutely sure it is, but that's not the point. I think firms who haven't embraced it, who frankly I think probably going to need to,
it's not going to go away, is it?
It isn't. It absolutely isn't. And absolutely that's the direction of travel with the Land Reg. I mean, I mentioned in passing, you know, their digital identity scheme, and you know, we've got the Safe Harbour scheme, and we've got, you know, the Law Commission saying, well, you know, deeds signed electronically are going to, you know, will invariably be legally valid if they're ever challenged, if it's done properly. You know, this isn't going away, which also is one of the reasons I wanted to do the book now, really. And I say,
did you enjoy writing it?
Yeah, I did. I mean, inevitably, I never feel as if I've got enough time, but it was, you know, it's quite satisfying actually delivering it to Gary and Tim at Law Brief before Christmas. But as I say, then there was a bit of a hiatus because I'd written it, and then the Land Reg, bless them, it was very, very kind of them actually, got in touch and said, well, actually, Lorraine, because they knew I was doing it. They don't endorse the book, I might add, but they were, you know, happy to say, well, actually, Lorraine, we're about to change something, so you might want to hold off for a bit, which I thought was really good of them. So it should have come out in March instead of May. But and then they did do a big change, which I will actually mention in a sec, Stu, but it's still actually a little bit nerve-wracking when it's out there, because you still think, oh, you know, what are people going to think of it? As I say, it's not somebody I locum for hoped that I was doing something sort of a bit of a bodice ripper when I said I was doing a book. They said, oh, you know, you're doing a real bodice ripper. I went, no, it's digital signatures in conveyancing. Oh, okay. And to be fair, it might get somebody going, Stu, but not many. But yeah, so I did enjoy it, but I would like the luxury of a bit more time, I think. But then, you know, wouldn't we all?
As part of the Conveyancing Companion series, so I'm assuming will there be more?
Yes, the idea is, yeah, exactly. I do want to do more. So if anybody's got any suggestions as to topics they'd like to see, I'd be very happy to think about them. Yes, but the idea is that I do more, because the really good thing about Law Brief Publishing, and I say Gary and Tim are absolutely delightful, who run the company, is you know, that they are deliberately sort of bite size. You know, this isn't, you know, everything you ever needed to know about conveyancing, you know, apart from anything else. You know, the conveyancing handbook's out there and it's brilliant and it's the conveyancer's Bible, and there's no point in trying to compete with that. And frankly, it would never occur to me, to be quite honest. You know, the idea is to try and do sort of bite-sized things, and that's Law Brief Publishing's raison d'etre, I might add. To you know, the niche things really, or the, you know, the things that, well, if you just want to know about this particular subject, you'll just get the book on that. But
I think it's a really nice USP, because, you know, we all live busy lives now, so to sort of consume volumes and volumes and volumes of information is difficult, isn't it? But a bite-sized chunk is the one, isn't it?
That was hopefully the thing. And as I say, and it's deliberately not, and again, I mean, it sounds like I'm putting disclaimers all over it, but you know, this is not an academic treatise.
Are you a lawyer?
Yeah. you know, it's not intended to be, you know, the last word on, you know, the legalities of electronic signatures, because cleverer people than me have done that. And as I say, there are clearly, particularly, for example, in, you know, big city firms or whatever, you know, there are people out there who are all over this, and this would not be their thing at all. But it's not written for them. It's very much written for busy coalface conveyancers who need to think about this stuff. Find Practice Guide 8 a little bit inaccessible when they first look at it, and I've just literally tried to break it down into sort of component parts, sort of in the context also of thinking about, you know, the signatures and the deeds and the case law. But actually, one thing I was going to say, Stu, and this is one area that conveyancers I think need to really think about carefully, because you know, in terms of, well, you know, what risk does it represent and why does it matter? You know, why does a firm need to be bothered about Practice Guide 8? Well, it needs to be bothered about Practice Guide 8 because if you adopt, you know, acquire a platform, you know, their services and use witnessed electronic signatures, either the seller's conveyancer or the buyer's conveyancer have got to certify in their own name that Practice Guide 8 has been complied with, and that certification has to go to the Land Registry with the buyer's registration, and the Land Registry will rely on that. So, and I say it's in, and the change they made was that could be done by either conveyancer. So if you think about it, you've potentially got the seller's conveyancer, who of course will have control of the platform because it will normally be them signing the getting the transfer signed that way. They, the seller's conveyancer, will be certifying to the buyer's conveyancer that they're compliant with Practice Guide 8, and the Land Reg will rely on that. So that is suddenly bringing the seller's conveyancing firm right into the frame in terms of reliance in relation to a Land Registry application. And that was the change they made, which I wanted to wait for because it was quite significant.
Very significant.
I think so. And as I say, and I just think firms need to think about it.
Yeah,
you know, that was the point, really. I think it's probably a fait accompli, but I do think firms need to think quite carefully about how they're going to do it and how they're going to introduce it. Because if you've got a big team of people, well, who in your firm is going to be able to give that certificate in their name, for example? Everyone, in which case it's quite risky. Just a few people, in which case you've potentially got a bit of a logjam. You've got a bit of a So it's all doable, but firms just need to think about the risk. And if they're thinking about risk, they then need to be considering their Practice Guide risk assessment and their, you know, PCPs as a result.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'm assuming we're going to put a link as to where everybody can get this book in the bio.
Yes, we will. I mean, it's available on. And in fact, oh gosh, I was so excited to. It is actually available on Amazon. I honestly, I mean, to be fair, it's much better to buy it direct from Law Brief Publishing. So yeah, I'll put a link to their website. But what I'm also going to do, Stu, is a webinar and the book as a little package. So people need to keep an eye out for that, so they can get a little webinar on it and the book and a free book as part of the package. So there's lots. So I'm quite excited about it, really. Now that I'm talking about it, now I'm talking about it, I'm really quite excited.
Glow in your face.
Yeah, it is actually, because it's I spend a lot of time doing things for other people, which I you know, I really enjoy. But it's actually really, really nice to do something that's mine.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's a great way to end.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for letting me hijack Conveyancing Matters for my own shameless publicity purposes. I do appreciate it, mate. Shameless. Absolutely shameless.
I'm still waiting for my signed copy.
Yeah, well,
I'm not happy. I'm not happy that I've got an unsigned one here.
Is anybody going to actually believe us when we say that, you know, I think you and I have met once face to face about 2 years ago? So, yeah, when you actually get to see me in the flesh, Stu.
Okay.
The irony is I will bring a pen and I will put a wet ink signature in it. How's that?
A wet ink, I know. The irony.
Yeah.
You can't do it digitally for me then.
No, exactly. I can't.
All right then.
All right, love. Well, thank you for well, as I say, letting me be, you know, a shameless self-publicist.
No worries. Have a nice day.
Take care, love.
Take care.
Bye.